While we've got you, you used your last speech in Parliament, didn't you, to push the Prime Minister for the blood inquiry. It started today. Your thoughts on that?
I'm glad you've asked, Kay, because this day has taken far, far too long in coming for the thousands of British families whose lives were ruined, basically, by the scandal of contaminated blood. You know, unlike a tragedy like Hillsborough that hit this city, the victims of contaminated blood have been scattered all over the country, and their story hasn't been fully told. And I think they've suffered in silence and have been in the wilderness for many years. But finally, today, they've come to the fore and begun to tell their story. And, you know, I don't know what will come through the inquiry. I can only speak from my own experience of my knowledge of this whole scandal. And it's basically one of a criminal cover-up on an industrial scale. And I think when the full truth is told about contaminated blood, I think the British people will be shocked by it. And I also think they will come behind those victims and those families and demand from here on in that they are treated properly. They're given all the answers they deserve, full truth, full justice, compensation, accountability. I hope today is the start of that, Kay.
Do you think, finally, Mr. Burnham, that there could have been something else you perhaps would have done as when you were Health Secretary?
Well, possibly. I mean, I inherited a decision from my predecessor where a decision had been made on something called the Archer Report. And it was only towards the end of my time as Health Secretary when a former MP, the late Paul Goggins, a friend of mine, sat down with me and asked me to meet some of his constituents who'd suffered. And it was only when I spent a couple of hours with them in my Lee office in early January, I think it was, 2010, when I really understood the issue and resolved to do something about it. It was getting too late in terms of our time in government. I began to reopen it when I was in the Department of Health, but it was then only more recently when I made the connections between Hillsborough and contaminated blood, when I saw parallels of what had been done to the Hillsborough families being done to the victims of contaminated blood, that I really then felt that there was a major injustice, and that's why I used my final speech in Parliament to try and put it right. So absolutely, Kay. I mean, I would say every member of Parliament in this whole period hasn't done enough for those victims, given what they've been through, and I'd include myself in that. But as ever, it's never too late. There's always time to do the right thing. It's great that today is happening and that they've now got at least the hope of truth and justice. But I would ask every member of Parliament on all sides of the House to get behind those families and make sure that from here on in they get all the support that they deserve and that they need.